back. This is obviously part 2 of my favourite Halloween horror films. Ow. Really cold and really wet today, and it feels like there's a draft in here in my leg area, and I'm not enjoying it. So, as you can see, I've come as the puppet from Five Nights at Freddy's today, so I'm gonna get right back into the list. We finished off last time at number 7 with Chronicle, and so we move swiftly on to number 6, which is Funny Games. This is another old favourite of mine. And when I refer to Funny Games, I do of course refer to the English shot-for-shot remake, although I do own that and the German version on DVD. The reason I prefer the English remake is not just because it's in English, it's because I love Michael Pitt, okay? This is another one that I don't really want to say too much about, because if you're going to watch it, I would prefer people to go in blind. I will say that it's very weird and it's a bit disturbing, but it is also weirdly funny in a kind of outlandish way. It provides a commentary on why we watch violent horror films, and I like that. I like that it has an agenda. There are also some really interesting stylistic choices, including, small spoiler, fourth wall breaks at some points, which is, you know, I would fully give this one a 10/10, and the reason it's number 6 at the list and not higher is because I've just seen it too many times. There have been other films since then that have blown my mind, but rest assured, this is one that I will always love. Pretty sure this is one that like kickstarted my liking for really strange horror films. This was one that me and my mum watched together, and there was one scene in particular when my mum wanted to turn the film off, and I was like, no, please, mother, please let me watch the strange film. I think I must have been like 13 at the most. And 10, go watch Funny Games. I don't mind which version you watch, just go watch it. And we're finally into the top 5, everyone. Oh my god, I just went outside to get a brew and it's absolutely chucking it down. It is in fact a dark and stormy night. So, number 5 is The Babadook, one of the best horror films I had seen for ages. It genuinely terrified me, and it was just, you know, weird, kind of fairy tale-esque, full of strange little metaphors and references to old horror movies. Oh, boy, it raining. I think it was almost like a universally, well, not universally, but it was a pretty agreed upon thing that The Babadook was a good film. And I think that most people have probably seen it or know enough about it by now that I don't have to explain the plot. So, I'm just going to tell you that for me, the scariest scene is when the Babadook first shows up, yo. He fucking is knocking on this woman's bedroom door. And she's like, who's there? And he like, the sound that they had this monster make is one of the most terrifying sounds I have ever heard. I'm not one to be struck with fear by a noise, really. Music is different. Just the sound of someone saying Babadook duck duck is not uniquely horrifying in itself, and so it just really scared me. It was horrible, and it just started screeching. It was absolutely insane. Some of the best scenes for me are when the Babadook is taken over, but it's not actually started doing anything too crazy yet. It's just making the mum out like a bit of a weirdo. I think that it brings a lot of tension to the film, like what is she gonna do next? And it also brings some of the more hilarious moments in the film, my favourite of which is when the kid comes in and says he's hungry, and she sits up and she's like, if you're so hungry, why don't you go and eat shit? Fantastic, fantastic writing. The one thing that I don't get about the Babadook in all of its metaphorical resonance is the worms at the end. Spoiler alert, they keep the Babadook in the basement and they feed it worms. And I don't know why, whether the worms are supposed to represent something or whether it was just like a cute little fairy tale moment thing. I don't know. The only thing that sprung to mind when I first saw it was there's this kind of old expression. I don't know whether this is like just me who knows this, but when you feel guilty about something, you say, I'm going down the garden to eat worms. And so the worms in the case of this metaphor would feed into, you know, the mother accepting that she has to live with the Babadook and with the guilt that comes along with that. I think now is a good time to discuss the horror problem, as I call it, which is scary over story. A lot of the times when you go and watch a horror film in the cinema now, it's, you know, a big jump scare fest, and it's scary while you're in there, but then if you go back and watch it, the story doesn't quite hold up. That's not what films are about. Like, you can't just scare us the first time and not have something to come back to. This is why people say that horror is dead, okay? You're making an embarrassment of it. Babadook is something that you can come back to even when it doesn't scare you anymore, and it's a good story. I've given the Babadook a 9 out of 10. I think because it was a little bit hazy on my first watch, but the first time I watched it, this was another one that my mum wanted to turn off and I made her leave it on. I immediately watched it again the next day because we rented it and it was going to run out, and I just needed to watch it one more time to make sure I understood what had happened. The fact that I could go back immediately and watch it again is a really good sign for the film, and so I'm unsure whether my 9 rating is a little bit harsh here. So think that as you will. Number 4, it's the second werewolf movie, and it is An American Werewolf in London. I love this film. It's the best werewolf film ever made, don't argue with me. It's funny and it's sad. And the transformation scene is horrific, and that is all you need to know. This film is not necessarily scary, especially not to me at this point, having watched it so many times. It is more a fun movie, but there are some scary scenes, like the scene where the 2 guys are on the moors at the beginning and there's some unknown beast stalking them. You can really feel their nervousness, and the way that the camera stays on them instead of showing us the surroundings really makes this feeling of the unknown even more terrifying. It makes it feel really claustrophobic even though they're on a big open field. I also think the scene in the subway is a particularly scary scene with the uptight British guy, and it makes me laugh and be frightful in equal measure. And I like the way that they don't show the monster in the scene. They have some really creative ways of doing that. This is something that the Babadook did really well as well. Like, I always say that you should not show your monster too much, or you should wait till the very end to show your monster. Obviously, fear of the unknown and all that. And even though the monster in this is not particularly frightening, because it's just, you know, it's a big dog at the end of the day. Nobody be scared of a pupper anymore. They do utilize it really well in that we don't know what it looks like, and so the wolf in our imagination is always going to be scarier than the wolf that they have created through real effects as well. They didn't use any kind of CGI in this. There's a lot of practical effects in this which are used very, very well. Another one of my favourite scenes is a more funny scene, which is the scene where he's in like a porno movie talking to all the ghosts. It's just so fucking strange. Like I said, the transformation sequence in this is great. I think it's still one of the best werewolf transformations I've ever seen in a film. Definitely better than the one in Twilight. Since we got to bring up Twilight in every video now. There's so many good scenes in this. Another really quotable one. Hello, David. Would you like some toast? Get the fuck out of here, Jack. In the scene where he's in the porno movie as well. Like, keeps, like, going to the screen and, like, this is the weirdest film you've ever seen. It's the guy, like, doesn't answer the phone. And he's like, hello? There's no one of that name at this address. And it's like, okay. I love the soundtrack in this as well. It's got Bad Moon Rising on it, which is always a plus. But I also like Blue Moon. I absolutely love that song. They're all utilized really well, I think. I really like the soundtrack. It's really good. This is a 7 out of 10 because, you know, it's not particularly scary, and that is what I ideally want from a horror film, but it is forever one of my favorites. Number 3 is Final Destination. It's hard for me to pick a favorite here, alright, but obviously I'm going to go for the first film if I had to choose. I love the first and the second film. I love the moody feel that they have to them and the fact that they take themselves a little bit seriously, but I do love all of them in my heart of hearts, and so I'm going to talk about kind of the entire series here. I would love to do a review of the entire series one day. The deaths that fucked me up the most, and you know that this is an important defining feature of your personality, is which Final Destination death fucked you up the most. The one that fucked me up the most is Pigeon Kid. who fucking goes through that traumatic experience in the second film where like he's in the dentist's office and he can't move and that rubber puffer fish falls in his mouth. And then he gets saved from that and he goes out to fucking chase some pigeons and a pane of glass falls on his head. Just completely messed me up because like this character was like so childish and so innocent and death just fucking took him out like it was fucking nothing. And it was the only time that they ever really involved a child or childlike character in the films. So that's probably a wise decision, but it definitely made the death more effective. The only other one that kind of messed me up was the laser eye surgery one in the last film, because I, as a person who wears glasses, I have obviously considered in the past going for laser eye surgery, and the thought of this laser being turned up to a point where it could just completely sizzle out your eyeball is pretty frightening for me, so I don't think I will ever be doing that. It just always amazed me how they managed to pick up on the disaster scenarios that you will imagine in the back of your head while you're going about everyday tasks and put them onto screen. I thought that was beautiful. My favourite scene of all time is the lotto winner guy in the second film who has the best luck in the world and it only gets him so far. He's like microwaving magnets, he's getting his hands stuck in the drain, climbing out of windows, there's ladders falling on him, shit is going down all over the place, things are on fire, it's absolutely insane, I'm living for it, I don't know which way it's gonna go. And then at the last minute, just as you think he's got away, bam, death takes him out just like that. It's such an epic scene and it's just classic Final Destination, you know what I mean, where there's just so much going on and there's so much tension and so much almost humour with it, but it's also such a clever scene because like there's little details in it where there's like clues about what's gonna happen. Pretty sure when he knocks the magnet into his food off the fridge, the magnets that he leaves up there say "I," and how he eventually dies is he gets like fucked up through the eye with the ladder. So, you know. I also like any scene with the guy from the morgue. I think he's an absolutely great character. And I was really upset when the writers flat out denied that he was death. I thought that was really stupid. I thought they should have left it open-ended. But for me, like, that will always be a possibility no matter what they have said. Final Destination gets a straight up 10 out of 10 from me. One of these could come out every year and I would go and watch it. For real. If you keep coming up with those gruesome, hilarious deaths, I will keep coming to the cinema, my friend. Alright, just take note. I also think at this point that I could perfectly write and direct one of these films. I feel like I'm a Final Destination connoisseur. Like, I've pretty much got a master's in it by now. Not to brag or anything. What a fucking flex, Sarah, what a flex. In at number 2 is Hereditary, Ari Aster's first film. Oh my god, a masterpiece. We bow down to him as one of the great auteurs of our time. I don't care that he's only brought out 2 films in cinemas. I don't give a shit, okay? This man, that's all I have to say. There was a point in Hereditary where nothing supernatural had happened for a good 45 minutes, and I was still terrified. This is the most horrifying and scary family drama that I have ever watched. The advertising for this was great, unlike Jennifer's Body. Jennifer's Body, okay, let's go into it quickly. The advertising for this was like straight up male gaze. All the boys went to see it because they thought it was going to be like some slasher film with a lot of shots of Megan Fox in her underwear, and then it was this fucking girly get together for the girls, and it completely bombed for this reason, and it was completely slept on for this reason, and I think only in recent years it has kind of gained the traction and the recognition that it deserved. You know, same with Megan Fox, but we'll get into that another time. The advertising for Hereditary was fantastic. It set up Charlie as like a main character, and then, spoiler alert, go into Hereditary blind if you've not watched it yet, I don't care. Spoiler alert, Charlie sets up as a main character in the trailers and then dies very early on in the film, and so from that point we're really unsure as to what is going to happen, and obviously fear of the unknown and all that, so it's a wild ride from there for me. And I would, if anyone is watching this I would really like to know what you thought the scariest slash best scene in this film was. I would really like to know. Because for me, personally, the scariest scene is when, quite near the end of the film, after the dad has like burned up, he is just upstairs after he's broken his nose. He wakes up and obviously we see Annie is like floating at the top of the fucking room, like creeping around up there. It's not her being up there that scares me, really. It's the fact that Peter wakes up in this dark house, his home, yeah? Peter, throughout this whole film, has had zero idea, really, of what is going on. It's all been about Annie, even though it's all really been about him. And just the fact that he has no idea what is about to happen, or why, or even like how, is completely terrifying to me. And every time I watch that scene, my heart like stops for him because he has no idea what's coming. We do. That is a horrible thing to do to your audience, Ari Aster, and I fucking love it. I think another one of my favourite scenes is Annie is sleepwalking and she has like the dream where she like reveals things to Peter. Then all of a sudden they're both covered in paint thinner and then they burst into flames and then she wakes up. I just think it's a really intense scene, and obviously because we're not sure whether she's asleep or whether she's awake and which bit is real, we're not sure what exactly is being said and the effect that it's going to have on everything, and it's just, you feel in this scene and the scene surrounding it, the pair of them kind of descending into madness, and the dad's just kind of standing there like, fuck, what the fuck is happening? Thank God I'm not related by blood. Of course it doesn't do him any good in the end. Because I obviously didn't know Ari Aster as a director the first time I went to watch this, I took everything kind of at face value, and as a result I missed little bits of what was going on and didn't completely understand, and so I had to go back and watch it again. But once you do go back and watch it again, you realise that actually there's a lot of clues leading up to the climax that clue you in on what's going to happen. Really a lot. Like, kind of give away the whole shebang, not as much as Midsommar did with the first frame being the entire story. You do know exactly what's going to happen before it does. One thing this film does that Midsommar doesn't is that there's a bit of misdirection, because Annie, obviously, when she's at the meeting, the grief meeting at the beginning of the film, goes into her family history, and we think that, in my mind at the very least, and especially because of the title Hereditary, I thought that the whole thing was going to turn out to be a mental illness thing, maybe. So open to it going in that direction if it was handled well, but I'm glad that it went the way it did, and I felt like that was a really good bit of misdirection right there, because it was slipped in and never mentioned again, and so you thought that that was the clue, but no, it was a red herring, and it was a really subtle one, and it wasn't one that was driven and pushed heavily. So you didn't think, oh well, they're pushing this so heavily, it's obviously a misdirect. So props to you, Ari Aster, props to you. I just love him. I think his films are god tier stuff, and that is why Hereditary for me gets a 10 out of 10. And finally, the number one spot, and officially the greatest horror film of all time, don't argue with me, is The Cabin in the Woods. You might argue with me on this, you might think it's campy, whatever, I don't care. It's an unexpected gem. The advertising was fantastic, the premise, golden, the twist, amazing, the metaphors, the resonance, the funnies, everything. It's got everything. It's even got Chris Hemsworth. I mean, he alone makes it a star-studded cast. This is definitely a horror film for horror fans, because I think that people who I've shown it to who don't watch a lot of horror films do take it very at face value and like only see the campiness of it. Campiness of it is very intentional in my opinion, because obviously it is parodying horror whilst at the same time doing something new with it. You know what I mean? It's essentially a classic horror film with the most meta twist of all time, and I just fucking love it. The best scenes, in my opinion, are the blonde girl is kissing the wolf in the beginning. There's literally no fucking reason for it, and it's so gross and so weird, and you kind of realize after watching it that that was the point, and that it's making a kind of commentary on like why we need to have sexy girls in horror films and why we need to have them do sexy things that don't make any fucking sense. The fucking scene where the guy who's been moaning that he wants to see a merman the entire film gets taken out by a merman has got to be the greatest use of irony I have seen in a film ever. Ever. Shakespeare could never. He's quaking. And obviously, Chekhov's bong, as I like to call it. The stoner guy in the beginning turns up with a massive bong and then takes out the villain with said massive bong. You know, don't show a gun at the beginning of the film if you're not gonna set it off in the final act. The film, in conclusion, is funny, it's clever, it's rewatchable, it's so fucking great, it's got so many references to other horror films in it. And I think that anybody who enjoys horror in general should give this one a watch because honestly, it is so worth it. It's so worth it and I enjoy it every time I watch. It's a 10 out of 10 from me. And oh my god, that's the end of the list. Oh my god, this has taken up so much time. I fully didn't realise that I was going to go on for this long. But there you go, that's the way it goes, and I have nothing left to say, so I'm going to bid you adieu until next time.